there is such a thing as the Mandela effect. And there seem to be more and more instances of it, which is sus in and of itself. This morning I found another one, and I've known about this for years, and I was checking myself, meaning I probably got into my head that something that never was true was absolute fact. So I checked myself, and I looked up why Washington, D.C. is Washington, District of Columbia. Now, years ago, I learned that it was basically so the federal government's headquarters could be safe from basically self-persecution. It was so there weren't double standards, but also so the capital could remain safe from persecution from itself, in a way. Because if you think about it, how can you police, and I do mean, federally, the White House? Unless, of course, the White House lives in, if you will, quote unquote, is situated in, is within the legal boundaries of somewhere other than an area that falls under the jurisdiction of the federal government. It's twisted, I know. But this is why we look these things up. And we all have the internet now, so it's very easy. And you know what else we have now? ChatGPT. So, first and foremost, I looked it up in a Google search. Why is Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C.? And I got a couple of things. And they, both, or three, I think, which is not a big, pool of people to check. But one of them was a full-on newscast. And they were all up Christopher Columbus's rear end. Oh, well, they named it Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, because back in the day, the states were known as C-O-L-M-B. Okay, that was completely reaching. And then they were like, okay, well, but no, it's actually in homage or a tip to the hat to Christopher Columbus for finding America and District of Columbia and the Statue of Liberty, and, she's Columbia, and, I want to say Columbina, but Columbia. And I said to myself, that has nothing to do with anything that I ever grew up learning, but maybe I learned it wrong. Maybe I'm completely out of my mind, and I'm suffering from what you would call the Mandela effect, meaning I absolutely thought that I knew something, but I've been completely wrong the entire time, and I hate being embarrassed. So what did I do? I looked it up on ChatGPT, and I said, isn't D.C. in the U.S. Capitol's name to keep Washington from falling under the jurisdiction of the federal government? Which is a weird way to write it, but ChatGPT understood it. And you have to type it in a very specific way for ChatGPT. Now, I want the real answer. I'm not trying to make up answers here. I want the real answers. So again, isn't D.C. in the U.S. Capitol's name to keep Washington from falling under the jurisdiction of the federal government? Think about that. ChatGPT answered me, yes, you're correct. Washington, D.C. stands for Washington, District of Columbia. The inclusion of District of Columbia, in quotes, reflects the unique status of the capital. It was established as a federal district separate from any state to avoid giving any single state undue influence over the capital, meaning even Washington. You can't police yourself. That doesn't make sense. It's a conflict of interest. So again, undue influence over the capital. This way, the federal government could operate independently and not be subject to the jurisdiction of any particular state. Any particular state. If you have more questions, blah, blah, blah. Yes, you're correct. Washington, D.C. stands for Washington District of Columbia. The inclusion of District of Columbia reflects the unique status of the capital. It was established as a federal district separate from any state to avoid giving any single state undue influence over the capital. This way, the federal government could operate independently and not be subject to the jurisdiction of any particular state. Meaning that Washington, D.C. doesn't have to deal with constituents and its congressperson making rash decisions that might change and affect things about the laws of the land of the capital of the country. You follow me? There's a huge reason that, and this is the forefathers, of course, wrote District of Columbia. It's not District of, Christopher Columbus. It's District of Columbia. Because we owned Columbia back then. I mean, we probably still do. I'm going to say, of course, and I hope we do. Somebody else looked that one up. Does America own Columbia? You think you know when you just said, of course it doesn't, Jerry.